We're going to continue on our journey here this month. The October theme has been about where is God? And so we've explored the last few months, where is God in our pain? Where is God in our freedom? And part of what we're advancing here this month is this understanding that we have to first re-understand, reclaim a new meaning about what God is. Because for most of us, we come from a tradition that sees God as this outside entity, right? Generally, he's like this white dude, right? Cool beard, whatever we see him as. But that's not really what God is. God is not even a person. God is not a gendered person. God is an essence. God is an energy. God is eternal. God is oneness. God is unchanging. And so part of, even after we've been in here in unity and in new thought for some time, there's still that need to continue to revisit how we perceive and connect with spirit. And so it's a constant daily thing for us to connect and understand that God is not fickle and God is not punishing us and God is not changing its mind and God is not someone that has to be supplicated to give us and grant us something in our life. God is something that is within us. God is a spiritual inheritance that we are. God is something that we learn to be in the flow with. We learn to exercise. We learn to align with. And so that's where we're at on this journey, flipping the questions around to understand so that we can really pay more attention to how we think and feel about this thing called God, of many names. So switch it out. If God doesn't resonate for you, spirit, universal intelligence, divine love, we're talking about the same darn thing, y'all. Today, we're going to move into something. Where is God in my triggers? Anybody ever been triggered? Everybody, right? Everybody. And so sometimes triggers come in the most inopportune times, right? Maybe you're at a staff meeting. Maybe you're in the line at Kroger. Maybe you're dealing with your family. Nobody's ever been triggered by their family, right? Triggers. It causes us to react. It causes us to kind of come out of our Zen zone, and sometimes we can't even control it. Sometimes we don't even understand that it's happening to us. We find ourselves maybe angry or anxious or scared or resentful, sad. All of these emotions that can sometimes be part of that trigger. And part of the journey that we are taking as we kind of open up conversation around this is to really have more compassion for ourselves and for others around this idea of being triggered or being in-triggered or being the recipient of a trigger. Ever been on that end too? You're like, whoa, where is this coming from? Part of it is really for us to understand how triggers are really an opportunity to align with spirit. It's really this opportunity to become deeply in and of and as sacred presence when we're moving through a trigger. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the science of triggers, okay? We're not going to go deep on this, so this is just really quickly so that we can kind of understand. Our brains are wired in such a way that we're constantly scanning the environment. We're scanning the environment for how we feel safe and how we feel threatened. And so our brain sometimes jumps in to be able to take care of us, to take care of our bodies and our minds when we sense something is a threat. It is very much this primordial, this thing, this fight or flight and sometimes freeze response that takes over us, that takes over our physical body. So, as we have our development as human beings, that's a useful tool to have, right? So if you have a tiger chasing you or the bee that you don't want to bite you, right? What do? You move. You may move. You're sort of fleeing. You're adjusting. Your body's telling you there's something and you need to have a physical response. But that's not so helpful when what you're being chased by is your memories. What you're being chased by is a traumatic past. And so that's where it gets a little complicated when we're still adjusting and we're still reacting and our bodies and our minds are doing this when it's really to caretake us. It's that sympathetic nervous system that's jumping in. It's activating. It's zeroing in on what can be perceived as a stressful response. Our heart rate goes up. All of this bodily things happen, and sometimes we don't realize that we're living in a constant state of trigger. Maybe it's the news that you're watching. Maybe it's the people that you work with. We don't even realize the extent to which we are in a constant state of trigger. And when our bodies constantly undergo that on a daily basis, it results in serious health problems like high blood pressure or insomnia. Anybody been there? Not just me, right? Y'all just leave me hanging all the time. See? There you go. It does. So I've already talked a little bit about kind of what are some of the triggers, right? Where we get angry, someone says something, or does something, and we just flip our biscuits, right? Like, does it ever happen where maybe even just a tone, like that was a tone, right? And maybe that voice or that inflection reminds you of something, of someone. Maybe it was your father that spoke to you, or a teacher that was not in favor of you or was not kind to you. Sometimes it's those little nuanced things that create these triggers. We become defenseless, or we get frustrated, or we get overwhelmed, or we start blaming, or we procrastinate, or we distract ourselves, or we just avoid the thing altogether because we know our body is telling us something's not right here. I don't feel safe. A lot of times these triggers are deeply unconscious. We don't even realize that we're reacting to this, and what ultimately we're reacting to is something in our past. We're reacting in real time to someone or something, but in reality, it's something that is being clouded over, that's being triggered by, that has this information center that is from something or somewhere else. We don't often realize it. I had a friend who hated to go into basements. And she would always get really anxious and upset, and she never understood why. And it wasn't until years later, through therapy, that she finally realized that she was sexually abused in a basement when she was a child. And so just the smell of the basement was the trigger for her. Sometimes you don't even know what is happening. I laughed because most of you know that I have Bell's palsy and I'm still working through it. And so my eye, one of them doesn't blink as much. And so the other one becomes overworked. And so by the end of the evening, my eyes are just all cross-eyed and a hot mess because they're just really overtired and overworked. And so imagine trying to be in a meeting in the evening when you're kind of doing this, right? And so it was hilarious and not hilarious, but I was in a conversation with someone, and it kind of got a little, not heated, but intense, let's just say. And so I said something, and I guess I moved my eye in such a way, and the person said, "Stop rolling your eyes at me." And I was like, "I'm not rolling my eyes, they're just messed up, y'all." So now I have to go into meetings in the evening and tell people, I'm still in process with my face, y'all, so don't take the facial expressions any kind of way. It sounds funny, but it happens, right? Where we react to someone, where we think they're thinking something or doing something or in a space, because that is something for us to sort of understand and take in, like, why am I doing this? I was in another situation where I had someone who was really having a hard time with me. And we had a really great relationship, and then all of a sudden it went from not good to, from really great to really conflictual, and I couldn't understand what was happening, and a lot of it wasn't rational, what was happening and kind of the things that they were reacting to. And so in a conversation one time, I don't know what, but Spirit just spoke, and in the middle of the conversation, making no sense at all, I just said, "Do I remind you of your mother?" And then that person said, "Oh my God, you do." And it was just this moment of calm, and the person just said, "I have been reacting to you as if you were my mother. You remind me, you maybe look like her a little bit, but it's not that. It was just other things," and she explained the kind of things. And so literally in that moment, she made the dots and the connections of what was really going on with herself. Sometimes our triggers and the source of our triggers are so deep, it takes many years to understand, and sometimes it just takes that perfect moment to come to clarity and to come to consciousness about it. A number of years ago, I was having problems sleeping. And I've never been the type of person that had issues sleeping. I could sleep in the middle of a party. I was known for that person. Like, the rage is going and I'm on the couch, like, taking a massive snooze, right? I was known for that. I could sleep. I had no problems, but I was starting to have sleep issues. But it got to the point where I was literally in fear every night. I would hear noises. I thought someone was coming in. It was a serious situation, not just that I was not being able to sleep, but I felt like I was in terror every night. And this went on for a couple of weeks until one night it got so bad that I felt so scared and overwhelmed and threatened that I decided that I was going to sleep in my closet. So I took a pillow and a blanket and I closed the closet door, and I fell asleep in there somehow. And I woke up the next morning in my closet, y'all, and I realized something is really not right here. So I went on this exploration. Luckily, at that time, I had just been certified as what's called a Q coach in the quantum living process. And really, it is a process all about uncovering your triggers and reprogramming yourself to have a better relationship to them. And so it's this worksheet process, which I won't go into, but I thought, okay, I have a tool. Let me use this tool that Spirit has put in my path. And so I used the tool. And in this process, because there's a meditation involved and kind of just being heart-centered and just being open to Spirit and just allowing for Spirit to speak. And in this moment, as I was going through this process with my own mentor and Q coach, I came to find out that I was reacting to something that happened when I was 18 years old that I had forgotten about. When I was 18, I was sitting outside of a home, and we had just been celebrating. I was a bridesmaid in a wedding, and all of a sudden, a car comes by and starts shooting. And I wasn't hit, I wasn't hurt, but the house next door, there was a young gentleman who was probably my age, about 18, that I didn't know, and he was shot. Now, I will tell you, to this day, I don't really remember anything. I don't really remember much, but the only thing I do remember is standing over his bloodied body, crying. And I remember as the ambulance came by, and I remember the EMTs coming out of the ambulance, and they were kind of laughing and joking, and I remember this rage that filled me, because I thought, this boy is dying. Have some respect for this boy. And I remember them moving to figure out what to do and putting him on the gurney and putting him on there with just no regard, no grace, no ease, and that anger and that pain being in there. And I remember crying and yelling at them. He is not a piece of meat. He is a human being. I don't remember what happened before. I don't remember what happened afterwards. I remember that moment, those moments in that time. I heard the next day that he had died, and I never spoke of that moment ever again. I actually had forgotten about it. Our bodies, beautiful people, hold deep memories, some that we don't even know still reside there. But they come up sometimes when maybe our spirit is ready. Maybe when we're ready, we're on a journey that spirit wants to up-level us and tell us that it's okay. And so I was fortunate to be able to understand what was happening. And at that time in Chicago, there was a lot of young men that were being shot. The violence in Chicago's summer was out of control. And actually, I was working in schools at that time with youth and foster care. And one of our students was one of the ones shot. And I had actually gone to a funeral. And so that was a trigger, really, without me knowing what the trigger was. And so I opened up to this process of healing around that. And even in just acknowledging and grieving it and trying to transform it, I was able to sleep again. But we've all been there at some level or another, where maybe we don't understand what's happening to us. We don't even understand the meaning of them. And so I tell you this story just to open up this sacred space for all of us to start exploring when we are in those deep emotional places, what is really going on? Because it's not what we think it is. Most of the time, there is something else that is happening in our bodies and in our deep unconscious that is asking, that is begging, that is saying, release me. I am ready to heal with you, for you. One of the things that I offer you today as sort of a practical is, again, as I've already said, kind of looking at that when those moments happen. But the other thing is really about transforming it. And that's kind of what I was going through, transforming. How do we take what has happened and be able to create a new story around it? And a lot of it comes down to, even in just in the short term, finding things that make you feel safe. Because most of the time, triggers are around not being feeling safe, whether it's that you're not being heard or someone is making you feel like, or you're feeling like they're not valuing you, or something is happening where really ultimately is that issue of safety and worthiness that's at the base of that trigger. And so part of the transformation is then to identify things in your environment where you can first off bring yourself out of that deep trigger, where if you're in an argument or something. And it's interesting that a number of years ago, a licensed social worker called Dana Morrow, created this thing called glimmers. Has anyone heard that? Glimmers versus triggers. And it's this idea of we're always scanning for cues to make us feel safe. And sometimes it's the cues that we're looking for trigger us. But the idea is look for cues that make us feel safe and comforted. And that helps in our brain wiring to be able to flip that script. So for some of us, if we're in that moment, we have to search like, okay, I'm in this trigger, like I'm losing my noodle, but what can I do? Or someone's losing their noodle. Maybe I need to just step away, or maybe I need to invite them into looking for some cues. I mean, it could be like being in that happy place. Does anybody have like a happy place when they're having a hard time they go to? Yeah, mine is a beach in Puerto Rico. Yep. That's my happy place, when I was there a long time ago, and I always kind of go back to that place. Or it can be anything really that you decide, an ocean, the cut grass, maybe like a cup of coffee. Anybody, coffee folks out here, you're like, it just resets you. That gives you that calmness that you need. It sounds silly. See, this is what I want all of us to understand. We have been given this idea about rationality and logic that it is supreme. And honestly, it's a part of it, but it's not. So we discount the things that seem irrational. We discount the things that seem so petty. But it's those things that can change you, change how you engage with the environment, with your feelings, with your past, because that is really what unity is founded on. When we think about it, unity is founded on this concept of affirmative prayer, of affirmative living. So it's like saying things over and over again, repeating things, catching things in your environment where you see the positive and not the negative. It's all of that that is reminding us of who we are in spirit, of what our spiritual inheritance is as people of divine mind, of source. And so we have to start looking for those micro moments of goodness or those micro moments of godness that are in our environment so that we're flipping the script. Instead of getting triggered, we're getting glimmered. Doesn't that seem bitter? Like, oh, we're getting glimmered. We are getting glimmered. Eric Butterworth, one of the late great Eric Butterworth, one of the famous unity ministers, he says this, when we go through so many things in our lives, and sometimes we're in trigger and trauma and challenge. And he says, you've been through a refining fire of pain and suffering. It has been a very difficult road, but the light of truth has been stretched out on the whole experience like sharp stones on the mare. The secret fire of truth had been boiling in the waters of the soul to make it a spring of healing. That secret fire is oftentimes what we're in the trigger. But that secret fire is really about bringing us to that healing spring. And this is what I want us to understand. When we are in a trigger, it is Holy Spirit that is working in us and through us and as us, that is wanting us to let that go, to transform that pain into a source of power. And so we have to understand that we are not being punished and that we are not weak and that we are not having to be victims and that we can't have self-compassion for ourselves. We do. We have to understand that those triggers are bringing us to deep truth. Are y'all understanding me here? This is where we're going. The wound is rising. The wound is bringing you into communion. The wound is bringing you into union, into alignment with the Holy Spirit. And it doesn't mean that you may let go of those things. It just means that you know who you are. It means that you know whose you are. It means that you know what to do when those moments come that tell you something other than who you are as a powerful being of the light. This is what we're doing. I'm going to close with something from May Rowland. Does anybody know who May Rowland is? There's going to be Unity old timers for real. Nope. Good. I love it. May Rowland was the director of Silent Unity in the Village for over 55 years. She started when she was 18 years old. Can you believe that? And she stayed at Silent Unity. She was like the prayer queen of unity for like 5 decades, right? But she grew in that. And one of the famous things that she would say that she took from one meditation of Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, was that all power is given unto me in mind and body. All power is given unto me in mind and body. All power is given unto me in mind and body. And so she wasn't necessarily talking about triggers and glimmers, but what she was talking about is that these things happen to us or around us or through us, but we are powerful beings. In her talk, I Feel the Presence of God, she says this: Your body responds to joyous words of life. It is a temple of the living God, constantly renewed and restored through the life-giving principle. Remember, you are the ever-renewing, ever-unfolding expression of joyous life. The sound of the love and joy of God flow through you to bless all humanity. God blesses you eternally. So remember picking up those cues of joy, reaffirming that joy even in the heartbreak, even in the pain, even in the trauma, even in the triggering of our post-traumatic stress disorder, even in the addiction, even in all of these things that happen. We have to claim our joy, good people, scanning the environment so that we can pick up on those cues, as little as they may be. Those are the glimmers of hope. Those are the glimmers of faith. Those are the glimmers of God. That is where God is in the trigger. It is everywhere. Everywhere. And with that, good people, I say amen. Glimmer on.